Well, they said that it couldn't be done. And it was one of those questions. Could anyone ever do it? And in 1954, it happened. Someone broke the 4-minute mile. That was a historic event because up until then, that was like this barrier. That was this line in the sand. Can anyone ever do it? Roger Bannister, in case you're wondering, was the man in 1954 that broke the 4-minute mile for the first time in recorded history. And a few years after that, there was a young lady, and she was 15 years old, and she wanted to go to the beach one day, but because of the color of her skin, she wasn't allowed to go to a public beach. Her name was Constance Baker Motley. And this spurred something within her. And when people said, it can't be done, we'll never be able to integrate. This was back in the 40s and 50s. She grew up in that time, and she became a Columbia Law School student, got her degree, did some law work for Martin Luther King Jr. Then she went on to be an assistant for Thurgood Marshall, if you know who that is, one of our Supreme Court justices from the past. And she was the first black woman to ever be elected to the New York Senate. And then that career was cut short when in 1966 she was appointed as a judge, a federal judge. She broke the barriers that a lot of people told her and were saying that couldn't be broken. You know, race is something that's real in terms of the struggles that we still have. It's not easy to talk about sometimes because it's laced with so many things that can get us distracted, but she was able to overcome that barrier in her life. Just this last fall, the youngest college student ever enrolled in Oklahoma Community College, his name is Elijah Muhammad, 12 years old. And it was interesting to hear the classmates that he was attending class with when they saw this young man walk through the door, and they were like, how old are you? And obviously that provides a pretty interesting discussion. And he broke the record, he broke the barrier that his sister made when she was the youngest college student, his older sister at 13, and she graduated college when she was 14. I don't know how that works. I wish I could have done that. But she graduated college, and now he's breaking another barrier. And coming up here, there's another barrier that's supposed to be broken. It was a record set by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in 1984. So if you're a sports fan, if you're a basketball person, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar set the all-time scoring record in basketball, 38,387 points. It was in April of 1984. And currently, there's a player that's still playing named LeBron James. Maybe you've heard of this guy. And he's 528 points away from breaking what was thought to be one of those unbreakable record in sports. And supposedly, if he's on track here, on March 8th, you know, they figure everything out these days. So on March 8th, when they play the Milwaukee Bucks, he's supposed to break this record if he continues his average. These were all things that were said that maybe could never be done by someone, but they were, and they were able to break through. You know what I've found for myself in my life? When it comes to breakthroughs, the hardest barrier to break through is in my mind. It's mental, it's psychological. And what I found is that God has opened the doors wide for breakthroughs in my life. He's opened the doors wide for breakthroughs in my family. He's opened the doors wide with breakthroughs in the ministry that we've had in our lives. And in so many ways, just probably way too many to even count. But those doors are wide open. But often it's my own mental reality that holds me back. Now, you've been to church every day so far this year, so you're doing good, all right? It's January 1st, 2023. And as you think about this upcoming year, the question I want to ask you today is, what's next? Think about what's next for you. What's next coming up this year? And I want you to think in two different ways today. I want you to think about yourself and your own little world and reality. And then I want to talk to us as a church family here for a minute and talk about what's next for us. Now, I've been really excited to get up here and talk to you about this. I could barely sit down in my seat for the last few minutes because I just feel like there's something very, very important that we need to talk about today. And I want to tell you that my prayer has been that this could be a moment for you when you came in, and I know it's January 1st, and probably most of you are up late and you're watching a game that you shouldn't have been watching until the very end, and then it was okay. And when you think about where you are right now, I've just been praying that God would remove the barriers in your mind in the next few minutes. It's a pretty audacious thing to think about, but in the next few minutes, could your life totally change? I believe for some of you it will. In fact, I just want to stop and pray about that for a moment. Can we do that? Just bow your heads with me. If you're with us on Daybreak Live, we're so glad you're here. Pray with us. Father, open our eyes today. Open our hearts. Lord, help us to see the barriers that you want us to break through as your people. God, the barriers that you want to break through for our church. And I pray this in Jesus' name, amen. Now, I'm excited about this year. This year, I want to tell you about where we're going here just for a minute. I want to walk you through the next few months of what we're going to be talking about, because I'm a person that does believe in fresh starts. And these new guides, we will start tomorrow, this new series, Money, Infinity, and Eternity. And so we'll start our readings tomorrow. So if you're here in the house, make sure you have one of these, and you can pick it up in the lounge on your way out. But over the next few months, we're going to be talking about just the role of material things in our lives, in our world. What role does it play? What role does money play? How does it all fit in scope of what we really should be thinking about, and that is forever, eternity. And after that, we're going to talk about this idea of pursuit. We're going to look at the life of David in the Bible. We're going to take a few weeks together. We're going to learn from him and the ups, the downs, the highs, the lows, the successes, the failures of David, a fascinating story in Scripture. After that, we're going to talk about unseen world. We're going to talk about the world that we live in that we can't see with our physical eyes, but exists and is just as real as what you can see in front of your eyes right now. Then we're going to take some time and we're going to talk about identity and sexuality. It's something that the world is talking about, and the Bible has a lot to say about it. And so we're going to look at what the Bible has to say about that for a few weeks in a series called Pure. And then, for a little lightness over the summer, we're going to talk about the end of the world. All right? Just keeping it light. We're going to talk about what the Bible has to say about the end of the world. It actually has a lot to say about that too. So that's where we're going. And each of these guides, you'll notice, not only is there for us as big kids, but also the little kids as well. And all of us here are going to be going on this journey together coming up for this year. So if you're brand new to this, maybe you're brand new to Daybreak. I know a lot of people are here for Christmas Village, and maybe you're joining us online and you're here in the house. And we've talked to a lot of people that have been checking out Daybreak since that event. Let me just say, this is something that we do where we just have a little Bible reading every day that gives us some guidance, and then we talk about it on Sundays. So that's where we're going this year. And I want to read to you from Romans 12 today. In Romans 12, one statement here that Paul, the author of this letter that was written to a church a long time ago, and this is what he has to say. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Did you catch that? By the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Right there in Romans 12, 1 and 2. It talks about offering our bodies as a living sacrifice. And as we talk about Scripture here each week at daybreak, and hopefully you're reading and tracking along with the guides, but sometimes we talk about big concepts and big stories. I want to talk to you about two words in this particular statement made by Paul. This idea of living sacrifice. It's an interesting phrase. It's kind of an oxymoron, so to speak, because it's two words that really don't go together. And if you've heard this verse before, you might be used to it, living sacrifice. I grew up going to Sunday school and to church, and so I'd heard that before. I didn't really think about it much until I grew up a little bit. But living sacrifice, living and dying. He's talking about growing and dying. In the same way, in the same phrase, a description of what we need to be and how we need to live. And so when you think about what that means to be a living sacrifice, so there's a part of us that's alive, and then there's a part of us that he's saying here. I need to learn how to spell. Oh my goodness, I did that in front of all of you guys. Wow. I typed too much. Okay, living sacrifice. So he talks about what it's like to be alive, how we can know God's will for our lives, how we can be transformed by the renewing of our minds. We're not in the patterns of this world, but we're on a different level. God can take us to a different level of life and living and thinking and breakthrough. But he talks about this idea of sacrifice. Here's what I found in my own journey of faith. If you could look at this as a continuum, when I came into the journey of faith, and some of you maybe are right there at the beginning, and you're like, I'm checking this out, I'm learning about the Bible, I'm learning about God, or I'm interested. It starts over here, and if you think about this as a continuum and as a progression, you're kind of moving this direction. And it starts off with this discovery. You're learning and you're thinking and you're growing and you're excited and there's this newness, and you realize the further you go down this continuum, the more life and living and excitement and purpose and joy that God can bring into your soul and into your life and into reality and into your world. And you realize that there's so much life that you never knew existed because you're finding it more and more, and you're finding this joy. And you realize how much it's doing for you. And then you get to a certain point, and if I could just maybe kind of think of it in this imaginary moment in your life, in your journey, in your relationship with God, that you cross over where it starts to become less about you and more about not you. It becomes more about God. It becomes more about others. And it's not really as focused on you. And you start to find a different kind of joy. You start to find a joy and a purpose that's outside of yourself. You start to find that doing things like being generous, you start to find things like thinking about the needs of others. You start thinking about things like, well, I can pray for someone else besides myself. I can actually not just see my community of faith here at Daybreak as just about my preferences or my needs, but I start to see it differently. I start to see that it's about other people too. It's not just about me. And something happens within us. And Some of you might be earlier on in your journey and you haven't maybe experienced that yet. And some of you here may have. And the thing about Daybreak is, in a beautiful way, we're all across the spectrum. That we're all over the place. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing because we're not just all down here beginning this journey. And we're not just all down here maybe having had quite a bit of experience in our journey of faith, but we're just all over the place. And so you might be at a place in your faith where you're still what I would call in that living side, where it's just breathing so much life into you. And you feel like every time you pick up the Bible, or every time you come to Daybreak, or every time you have a discussion, that you just feel so much better, and you feel built up, and you feel bigger, and you feel stronger. But then there's times when you realize that you achieve that effect by it being less about you and more about others and more about God. And so when we think about where we are as a church, one of the reasons I was so excited, because I feel like God just really spoke to me about this Sunday to talk about where we are at Daybreak. Where are we? You know, we're used to, as Americans here, I'm speaking mainly to Americans. We may have some internationals watching from Daybreak around the world. We do, by the way. But speaking as an American to Americans here for a minute, let me say that we tend to think of ourselves very individualistic. Well, it's about me, it's about my family, it's about my relationship with God, it's about my. And those are all true. But let me say it's also about us. In fact, when you pick up any word of the Bible, realize that it was mainly intended to be read and understood and processed in groups, in communities. Did you ever think about that? That when you read the Bible, it's not just your personal devotions, what a lot of people call that, or my personal time with God, and those are great, and you should be having those. But it's also about us. What about us? A lot of other places in the world, they think this way. We naturally think very individualistically. But who are we at Daybreak? So we're a church that I would say we love unconditionally. We love unconditionally. And this is one of the most beautiful things about Daybreak. When I became your pastor, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to understand. I wanted to understand who we are, who you are, and what this church is about. We think about, hold on, I need more time. I need more time. We love unconditionally. That we love people. In fact, I hear people say it all the time. You know, I've never been to a church and to a community of people that I felt like loved me for who I was. Isn't that amazing? I love that. Some of you are mildly excited. That's good. We love unconditionally. We love everybody. And you know, when you think about the world that we live in, the world is so divided. The world is so conditional. The love that you find outside of God is a conditional love. It's like, well, if you do this for me, then I'll do this for you. And that's not the love of God, by the way. It's a whole different kind of love. It's a whole different level of love that says, I love you no matter what. It doesn't matter what you believe, what you say, what you put on social media, who you vote for, what you look like, what you act like, what you smell like. I love you no matter what. And that's the love of God. And I believe that's the love that Daybreak has. It's the love that says we love unconditionally. It doesn't matter. And we can't allow ourselves to be divided by the things that we believe, because we're all on a journey. You know, there's a source of truth for us here. Make no mistake, there's a source of truth for us right here in this Bible. But we love unconditionally. We love everyone. We also serve faithfully. We're a church that loves to serve. As people ask me about the Christmas Village that we just had here a couple weeks ago, I had several people ask, did you know this would work? And I'm going to tell you the moment I knew it would work. The moment I knew it would work was when we called a meeting here at Daybreak and said, if you want to serve at the Christmas Village, none of you even knew what that was. Come out on a Wednesday night. And 210 of you showed up and said, I want to serve. And that's the moment I knew. That's the moment I knew. That's the moment I knew it would work. Because you serve. You know what I love about Daybreak is the fact that both men and women serve together. That throughout our Hiptown Kids Ministry, throughout Daybreak students, and all the way everywhere, there's men and there's women faithfully serving. Everywhere. You look around this church, you'll see it. You don't see that in a lot of churches, honestly. It tends to be lopsided sometimes, one way or the other. But we have a community that loves to serve, and I love that. That we serve together. We're also a group we're creative. We're a creative group of people, aren't we? We exude creativity. You know, a lot of people would say, well, why do we do the things that we do? Why do Sunday mornings look like they do? Why does this look like it does? Well, one of the things that we believe here and value is that we're a church that believes that creativity is a gift from God. And so the things that we do, we believe just for the sake of the beauty of creativity, we should experience together. We're also a church that we believe courageously, that we have big, bold faith. Going back to the very beginning of this church that God established through Wes and Claudia Dupin over 30 years ago, we're a church that said we believe courageously that God will do something amazing. And some of you here, there's not very many of us in the room, but some of you are around on December 31st, 1999, down at the Van Andel Arena. And you did something called World Party 2000, which was one of the most courageous things a church could ever do. It was a moment for this church. So we're creative. We believe courageously. We also really empower unity at our church. That Daybreak, we're a people that believe in unity. And not just unity of like our beliefs or ideas, but in just what you saw a few minutes ago on the screen, knowing the fact that every one of us, no matter what generation we're a part of, we're journeying together and learning together. In case you didn't know this, if you go to Hiptown Kids on any given Sunday, they'll be talking about the same things we're talking in here. And if you go to a Daybreak students meeting on Sunday nights, to one of their gatherings, they're talking about what we're talking about. And if you go in any growth groups where you're gathered together, young or old, or anywhere in between, we're all in this together. And that's important. So these are the things that are kind of unique for us. So when we think about that, I've thought for a long time about, before I became a pastor, I never thought I'd be a pastor. But before that, I remember thinking, I wonder what the average person, ask yourself this question, what the average person would think a church would want from them. And having kind of grown up around ministry and knowing a lot of pastor friends, those are the kind of conversations you have. And as I've thought to myself, and I've talked to many people about this, there's kind of what I would call the big three. That most people, if you ask them, would say, well, the church would want me to show up every Sunday. The church would want me to give my money. And the church would want me to serve. And I'm going to tell you what I'm asking from you. I'm asking one thing from you. As we go into a new year, as we go into a new era, as we go into a new reality, I have a challenge for you. And it's very, very simple. I'm a simple person. Ask my wife, she'll tell you. I like things really simple. I have one simple challenge for each one of us. For you individually and for us as a church community, as a family of faith. And it's really simple. And it's this. Take the next step. It's really simple. Wherever you are, take the next step. As you think about where you are in your journey of faith, we're all over the place, like I said. And you might be over here in this space where it's just new for you and you're just learning. And I'm asking you to take the next step forward. And maybe as you progress over, and maybe you're over in this zone and you're like, I know it's not about me. And you may ask, well, Jeff, how do you know when you're like on this side or this side? Well, one of the things that's a hallmark of people over here is they realize it's not about them. So when you stop thinking things like, well, I don't like that, so I'm not doing that anymore. I don't like that music, so I'm not going to Daybreak anymore. I don't like that preaching, or I don't like this, or I don't like that. When you realize that it's not about your own preferences, chances are you're somewhere over here. And for some of you, this is new, and you may think, well, is it okay to be over here? It's okay as long as you keep moving. So as long as okay is, what we say about Daybreak is this is a come as you are church, but it's not a stay as you are, right? So wherever you might be, so you might be over here, and you may love everything in your life, and you may love Daybreak, and you may love, but pretty soon there's going to be something you won't love. And when you don't love it, then what? When you start to realize it's not about you, you start realizing that maybe in the area of your finances, you give because maybe out of obligation or guilt or whatever reason, you get to a certain turning point where you realize that giving is a joy. That there's such joy and generosity. And some of you go, you're going to talk that openly about money? Yes. Because as Cyndi Lauper says, money changes everything. It's one of the most truest statements ever. If you don't know who Cyndi Lauper is, kids, look it up. It's important. When you realize that it's not about you, and you realize that God has given you resources to share. That's one of the reasons I'm wearing a red wristband when we had commitments a couple weeks ago, because I want this year in my life to be the most generous year ever for me. Because God's teaching me the joy of generosity. So when I give, I realize that it's not about me. It's not my money. God's allowed me to have it, to use it, to enjoy it, but to be a blessing to others, for serving. Some of you, the most valuable thing that any of us have is our time. And you may say, well, I'm busy and I don't really have time to do that. I can't show up to Hiptown Kids every day. There's people that get thrown up on their shoulders every week here at Daybreak. And it's not the youth group, it's the little kids, by the way. And they do it because they know it's not about them. It's about investing their lives in those little babies, that they would grow up knowing about Jesus and knowing the joy of sacrificial living. So when you're taking the next step, you're just moving forward all the time. And some of you may not feel like it. Me and Ariana were just talking this morning, actually, and someone told me recently that they gave me a good piece of advice because I said, I'm not really feeling good today. And it was a mom, and she said, you know what I say to my kids? Take a shower and keep moving. You feel better if you take a shower and then just keep moving. And I thought, that's actually pretty good advice. But keep moving. What happens is when you get stuck in this area, when it's about you, when you get stuck here, you start to lose sight of the fact of one of the secrets of faith that I want to tell you about. One of the greatest secrets of faith is that if you approach your faith wanting to be filled up, you'll walk away empty. But if you approach your faith wanting to be emptied, you'll walk away being filled up. And if you want to know the joy, the truest joy in life, it comes by living a sacrificial life. It comes by realizing it's not about you. It's not your life. It's not your job. It's not your career. It's not your family. It's not your money. It's God's, and He's letting you use those things. And so when you keep moving forward in your journey, so take the next step. What does that mean? It's about priorities. Prioritizing God in your personal schedule. It's about saying, God, I'm going to schedule my life around you and my relationship with you. In practical terms, it's making sure you open up a Bible every day. It's making sure that you spend some time in prayer every day. And you go, Jeff, I don't know how to do that. Just start. Start anywhere. It doesn't matter. Don't make it too complicated. You don't have to know all the answers. Prioritize God in your schedule. Prioritize God's family. Prioritize God's family in your life. I talk to so many people and they go, Jeff, I want to grow in my faith. I want to learn more. I do want to take the next step. But they never show up on a Sunday. And you think, well, that's really legalistic of you to say. I mean, it's not about that. But actually, it is. Because the Bible's really clear about what community around. We were designed to be in community. And if you don't quite understand that yet, just trust me when I say that it's good for you. It's good for you. That it will make your life better. That it will bring more joy to your life. Prioritize generosity. This is where really the rubber meets the road for a lot of us, especially as adults, but even we got kids and students here with us today in the house. Start being generous. Start learning to let go of things. Start learning to be open-handed with the things that you have, with the money that you've been given and entrusted with. Start prioritizing being generous with your life and with what God has blessed you with. These priorities are so important. Bold faith. Prioritizing a faith that goes beyond your mind. So when Paul here says to be a living sacrifice. As I was thinking about this and we were having a discussion with our elders throughout this year, we've talked about some of these concepts, and I realized that for a lot of people, you go from being what you might call a consumer, where it is about you. And you know, at Daybreak, if you're early on in your journey and you just need to consume, we understand that and we know that. And we're here for you. But there comes a time in your life where you go from being a consumer to being a producer. Where God starts multiplying the things in your life so that it's not just about what you take. It's about what you produce, what God does through you to change the world. We're coming up on Reset. And Reset are these gatherings that we've designed for all of us to take the first 23 days of 2023 and to prioritize and remind ourselves and to reset ourselves. And it starts tomorrow morning. And there's a person that's spoken to me, one of our elders, about this, and it's Marcy. I'm going to ask Marcy to come up. And Marcy's shared with me personally, and probably with many of you that know Marcy, about what this did for her last year in her life. So Marcy, come on up here and let's talk about where you were a year ago. We did Reset for the first time. And what was it like for you going into that Reset? What were you thinking and what were you expecting?
Well, I think the first thing, I was excited, but also it was dreadful. So excitement because I really believe in our church and your vision, and I was excited for that. But dreadful because we had just left a very rough year. My father-in-law passed away, and he was probably the most important person to our family. And we were just feeling pretty drained and tired. And also in that series, my mother-in-law had an injury in which she lived with us for about 3 months. So we were tired, fatigued, and to be honest with you, I hate the morning. Hate the morning. So my faithful, loving husband of 17 years, every morning takes my feet, pulls them out of bed, puts them on the floor, drags me to the shower, and throws me in. Once I'm up, I'm good, but I cannot get up. And to think that I had to get every 3 kids and myself and Mike up at 5:15 every day for 22 days, wasn't looking forward to it.
So starting
being
these,
honest.
Hey, it's all about being honest. And so you started coming to Reset, and then God started speaking to you. Talk about what you were hearing.
Yeah, so we kind of did it on this book, but there's a couple things, as Jeff called yesterday and said, what did he speak to you about? And I kind of went back through and said, I wrote a couple to-dos in here. And there were a couple of things that really spoke to me, and that was that John Maxwell actually said, with all the choices we have to make, the most important one, most important one is who we will become. And to me, legacy is really super important. And I didn't know that I was really providing the legacy I wanted to with having God first in my life. So that spoke to me. Also, C.S. Lewis, he said, someone shared this in the reset, every one of us every one of our choices causes us to turn toward God or away from him. And these choices become at the core of who we are. And when you really think about that, that's a punch in the gut to me. And mostly I would just say God was always a really big part of my life. For those of you who know me, I mean, I always read my Bible. I always prayed. But we didn't actually talk about what I was going to say. But as Jeff spoke this morning, when you talk about prioritization, there was this piece in here that said, for a reset, perhaps it may be time to conduct a values audit in your life. Look at your calendar. What you spend your time and resources on is what you value. And what I found was every morning when I came here, as much as I hate the morning, I felt full of peace that day because I came and actually put God first in my life. So while God was always important to my life, he was sort of getting fit into my life. And so that peace is really what I felt when I came. And I just think it's, it says in the Bible, when two or more gather in his name, he's there. And you just could really feel that as we gather together.
And I know Marcy, Mike, their family, if any of you say you're busy, just compare your calendars, because these are about the busiest people I know. And God began transforming you and the family through the reset last year. Just that commitment to be there and bringing your kids at 6 a.m. So by the way, it's 6 a.m. and 6 at night, in case you're wondering.
We're too busy to come tonight.
But yeah, but trying to make it accessible. But why is it important for us to consider this for this upcoming year?
Yeah, I would just say I think it's super important. It has really transformed me, and it's what Jeff was just talking about. If you really want to take the next step, and I know everyone's different in their journey, and to be honest, I became a Christian about 9 years ago, so it's pretty newer to me as well. And no matter where you're at, to take the next step is just a really great way to reset where you want to go. And I'm not a big believer of New Year's resolutions, but this is way more than a New Year's resolution. It's been extremely transformational for me in many parts of my life. It really, truly made me put God first. I'll tell you, on April 27th of 2022, I started getting up at 5:15 a.m. And if you think about the 4 categories, spiritual, physical, help me, financial, and social, those areas, I'm a person who likes to do it all, so I want to do every one. But really, when I sat down, I thought, nope, I just have to put God first. And so on April 27th, started getting up at 5:15. And then after reset, because I craved that so much, on August 1st, I started to get up at 4:15 a.m. to spend more time with God. And I've missed one day since August 1st of getting up at 4:15 because my son threw up all night.
Blame it on your kids. Way to go. Wow. It was all good until then.
It's okay. But I just have to say that it's when you put God first, he transforms every part of your life. I was having struggles with some relationships at work, and I've repaired those relationships because of time with God. I've been a person, we talked about the 7 deadly sins this year. I didn't really see eating too much or gluttony as a sin, and I have to tell you, I was kind of gluttonous and have lost 18 pounds this year because I gave that control and asked for God's self-control in that area. So I just want to say, putting God first and coming can be super transformational, and just ask that you be open to listening and hearing him.
Yeah. Can we thank Marcy for sharing? Thank you, Marcy. So my challenge for you in taking the next step is very specific here, is to carve out some time to grab a guy to spend time with him every day. If that's brand new for you, welcome to the club. It's amazing. And to join us starting tomorrow morning or tomorrow evening. And let's just make God a priority in our lives. There might be some of you watching on Daybreak Live, and you're here local in West Michigan, and you go, I've never even been to Daybreak. Join us. We'd love to have you here with us beginning tomorrow. This is a new opportunity. Allow God to give you the breakthrough that you needed. And I want to stop and just pray for you a moment about that. Can we do that? Lord, I just believe that today will be a really powerful day for many people. And I ask that you'd transform our minds, that you'd allow us to take the next step forward. And thank you for what you're about to do in our own lives personally, in our church. I pray in Jesus' name, amen. Now listen, let me speak really clear here. We're about ready to take offering, and we're going to do that. So it's something we do here. We've talked about it already, generosity, but it's an act of obedience. So as you give today, just allow God to give you the joy of what it means to give. Now, some of you stayed up late last night, and you got a little bit of joy right at exactly at midnight. You know what I'm talking about? Some of you don't. Do you know what I'm talking about? I know he does. Because a certain game wasn't so good, but then there was a little moment of redemption. And I don't know how God works and all that. I don't know if he has his teams. I don't pray for sports, but I just believe God really did something right at the end of that Ohio State game last night. So make you feel a little better. We're going to celebrate. We're going to end just on a little moment of celebration here. So God bless you today as you give.